Thank you, everyone, for joining this fun conversation. I'm so excited to be here with Ewelina, Adam, and Alex to talk about why does recognition matter and what they learned in their research. Before we get started with introductions and kind of the outline for today, a few logistics things. The webinar is recorded. You will receive the recording afterwards. And then you can share your questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. I will be monitoring them and then asking them of our speakers either throughout the conversation or we'll hold them at the end, depending on how the conversation flows. So feel free to engage, share tips, share thoughts, just make it very, very interactive. Okay, so before we get started, I have to give a taco to Alex, who made this connection happen, and which is why we're on the call today. I think it's been almost a year since we first connected about your research into the effectiveness of peer-to-peer leaderboards and things like that. So thank you for making that happen. It's been an awesome year just getting to know you guys and learning about your research and applying that in how we do HeyTaco and product development here. So today we're here to talk about the psychology of recognition. We all know that it matters. We all like to receive praise, but we might not know really why. So Alex, Adam, and Ewelina are here today to tell us why does this actually matter and why should we continue investing our time and energy into helping our employees being recognized and feel recognized. So I would love for you guys to introduce yourself. And Ewelina, if we can start with you, go to Alex and then Adam. Could you tell us more about your research background and yourself, and then why you chose to pursue this research?
So, hi, everyone. I'm Ewelina Forker, Assistant Professor of Accounting at the Wisconsin School of Business. And I research how organizations leverage technology to be able to measure performance and incentivize their employees. And I think that's really rooted in the 12 years that I spent as a manufacturing and supply chain manager before I jumped into academia. Because during those years, I noticed that even the most cutting edge technology often really fell short of expectations. And it was either because the incentives weren't aligned properly, the performance measures weren't quite right, or we just plainly didn't really consider how people actually behave when they use technology. And so I saw this over and over again in tech, in healthcare, in energy, and finally decided that I'd probably have a better chance of tackling these issues if I studied them in depth rather than trying to fix them kind of one company at a time. So I went back to school, I got my PhD at Emory University, and then here I am today hoping to share some of these insights on how we can do better for the people on our teams.
Thanks, Ewelina. How about you, Alex?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. It's a pleasure to be here. I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh just over a year ago with a PhD in accounting, and I now work at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in their accounting department. And I just really love research that informs like how to have a better workplace. I think we spend so much of our time at work. And so how can we make this environment like actually better for employees and better for the company? And like that's what really gets me up in the morning. And I love to do it. And I think I speak for the research team. We also love to learn from people who are in the field, so there's everyone on this call. So well, we like to think that we have some insights to share. We are totally in the position of wanting to learn also from the people here. We think it's a kind of a two-way street. And so I'm really excited to hear what kind of questions you might have and how we can all work together to try to, improve the workplace for everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
My name is Adam Presslee. I'm an associate professor at the University of Waterloo. I conduct research and teach in the area of performance management, which includes topics such as rewards and recognition. What got me interested in this? So I wasn't the best employee. And I think reflecting on why I wasn't the best employee motivates a lot of my research. And so I like to think of why wasn't I the best employee and what might have made me a better employee. So I think that's my secret of coming up with research topics. And I'm excited to be here today and share our insights and just echo Alex's shout out that we really enjoy hearing from practitioners and learning from practitioners. So very excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Adam, at some other point, I would love to hear why you weren't the best employee. I feel like there's more to unpack, maybe for a different webinar. But for today, shall we get started? So we'll have 3 different parts of this webinar. I'll ask questions throughout. Again, drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. And then at the end, we'll have some more time to discuss. So I'll leave it up to you to share your screens and just get us started.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with part one and then turn it over to Ewelina and Alex for parts 2 and 3. And along the way, Una, please interrupt with any questions or comments. And then at the end, look forward to any Q&A. So this part one is titled The Psychology of Recognition. Pretty sharp. And there's over 100 years of research in this space. So trying to reduce it down into 10, 15 minutes is not doing the science justice, but we will hopefully introduce some high-level concepts and how we think of the area and opportunities for future understanding of these topics. So just to start, we need a definition of recognition. So at least in our space, we're going to define it as non-monetary acknowledgement of contributions to the organization. And there's considerable survey evidence to suggest employees expect recognition, firms are using recognition programs, that recognition programs have positive, on average, impact on important outcomes like employee engagement and helping behavior, important outcomes like employee retention and loyalty. But here's the kicker. At least in the last 10 years, there's considerable evidence that says we are in a real low point in terms of employee engagement. And in fact, a majority of employees recently surveyed said, I don't feel recognized at work. So we have all this evidence that says good recognition matters, and yet we have this problem of employee engagement and feelings of underappreciation at work. So how do we think of these topics of recognition and employee engagement? Well, engagement is the persistent and pervasive state of enthusiasm, dedication towards work and the workplace. It's the grit and the grind. And there's 3 mechanisms that underline this engagement piece in the workplace. They're sort of the mechanisms that drive employee engagement. It's a sense of meaningfulness, sense of security, and sense of control. And as I said earlier, there's 100 years of research, but largely we can pocket that research in saying employee recognition can have a positive effect on engagement to the extent that it works through these 3 underlying mechanisms. So let's dig a little deeper into those mechanisms. First, what do we mean by meaningfulness? Well, recognition can increase the meaningfulness of a job by providing sufficient return for the efforts. Now that return, at least in financial sense, it's non-monetary. So what are we talking about? Well, it's the symbolic value of social improvement. We're social creatures. We desire social approval, and we symbolically value that. But there's also indirect contracting and career implications that are associated with recognition that we can't underprice. Yes, we're not encouraging folks to necessarily contract on recognition outcomes, but surely employees that are more recognized tend to do better in the long run. And so this all operates in the sense of meaningfulness, which can increase engagement. Second, well, recognition can also improve a sense of security. So employees that are working in predictable and positive work environments tend to have a sense of feeling psychologically safe. They tend to have this sense or feeling of belonging and ultimately trust their managers and their firm. And recognition has been shown to build this sense of security when done well, which drives employee engagement. And then third, employee recognition can help develop a skill in employees. And you're thinking, well, what skill is that? Well, it's the skill of self-efficacy, or this idea that I have belief in my own ability. When we recognize employees well, employees develop a skill of confidence or efficacy in their work, and that can translate into greater engagement and performance in the long run. So a natural next question is, well, then how do we do it? Well, let's start with the guiding light here. The best forms of recognition are those that are meaningful, provide that sense of security and a sense of control. If we can provide recognition that builds those three areas, we can improve our employees' engagement, their satisfaction, and long-run outcomes. So let's get at the how. There's several features to consider, and this summary doesn't do it justice. We have a guiding light, but now let's put it into action. Well, we have to think about what type of recognition should it be written letters, verbal thank yous, tokens, celebrations? Should the recognition be based on some discretionary subjective criteria? Should we have this explicit program? Should there be competition? Are there multiple levels of recognition? Hey, why should we recognize our employees? What's the basis for it? Should that recognition be at the team level, the individual level? And then who should give that recognition? There's so much work done on each one of these features that, again, we just don't have the time to go in depth on any one of those features. But I did want to explore one that's quite popular and increasing in its importance, and that's peer recognition. So peer-to-peer recognition is a system that functions as a cultural control. This is one in academic speak that it's like this idea of we're watching each other, but in a good way, where employees keep other employees accountable for their efforts. And you don't have to look very far. Practitioner articles and popular press talking about the benefits of peer recognition. Now, what's important here is that these articles really amplify when peer recognition is done well. But how do you do peer recognition well? We don't have a ton of empirical evidence, but I want to present for you two studies that talk about how to do peer recognition well. The first is one of the first real hard science looks on the efficacy of peer recognition and how can it increase employee helping behavior. And it provides compelling evidence that a system introduced of peer-to-peer recognition leads to greater helping behavior. But here's the twist. It works really well when the employees feel a sense of belonging or liking with their other employees. If employees are getting along, a peer system works really, really well. If employees don't, it still can work, just not as well. In another study, the authors looked at, well, if you're doing a peer recognition program, should you have some public recognition? Should that peer-to-peer recognition be put out there, amplified so everyone can see? And what the authors found, well, if you're having a peer system where people are recognizing one another often, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's private or whether it's a public ceremony, frequent peer-to-peer recognition works really well at increasing feelings of appreciation. When it does matter is when it's rare. If there's very rare occurrence of peer-to-peer recognition, and there's reason to think this extends to all forms of recognition, when recognition is rare, it actually does it a disservice when that recognition is made public as opposed to done privately. So it's just caution is needed when using peer recognition. And really the big takeaway from this study is we need that frequency of peer-to-peer recognition to build on itself. So I felt a little empty in terms of giving best practices because best practices really start with knowing your employees. And there is no one size fits all in terms of the feature of a recognition program. But there are 6 principles that are very well established that we wanted to share with you today. The first is when you're designing your recognition program, it is essential that it aligns with your core values. And you might think, well, yeah, Adam, that's obvious. But this idea of congruency is actually one of the biggest problems that we see in the research when recognition systems fail. It's one individual is dreaming up a system of recognition while another individual is dreaming up a system of financial incentives when another is developing some cultural program. There has to be a synergy from that alignment for these recognition programs to work at their peak effectiveness. Second one, it's the idea of variety. The benefits of several different recognition programs is it maps on well to a heterogeneous or a differentiating group of employees that have different needs and look for different forms of recognition. So we need to think of recognition not as a single event, but it's a program, a system of recognition to the extent we want to build one of culture based on those principles. This might seem obvious, but again, it's one of the biggest challenges we see when recognition systems fail. We need to do it early and often. The early part is it's important to link recognition to the specific behavior. And that's just fundamental behavior modification. Any parents on the call probably recognize the importance of that. And the often of that is it has this snowball effect. The research shows that contagion of recognition to create this culture is quite common. So when we can recognize early, when we can recognize often, our little snowball grows into a bigger and bigger snowball of recognition. Fourth, and it seemed a real shame that this had to come at fourth because it seems like it could be right up there at number one, but that recognition needs to be specific and sincere. The specific part is employees need to know why they're being recognized. If there is no specificity for the recognition loses its teeth. So it's very important that we link our moments of recognition for the reason for that recognition. But there's also, not just from a behavior modification, a reason for doing that is because perceptions of sincerity align considerably with that specificity. The more specific the recognition is, the beliefs about its sincerity increases as well. And so these two, while they're somewhat distinct, they operate together. When we deliver recognition, it needs to be specific and it needs to be sincere for it to have those positive impacts that we talked about earlier. The fifth one, and this is an underpriced, important best practice, is if we want our employees to recognize one another or to recognize their subordinates, we need to train them. We need to empower them, and we need to teach them how to do it and what we want them to do. This is largely an information story. Tell your employees what it is you want from them, show them and provide them with the tools to do it, and you will be surprised how quickly they take that up. Some of the employee issues that we see, it's not for a lack of motivation, it's an information story. They just don't have enough information about what the firm wants and the tools to actually execute it. And then last, and as the management accountant in me thinks not the least, is very important, is to continue to evaluate your recognition programs. It starts with knowing what you're trying to achieve with your program, having a nice measure of what that is, and evaluating. I'm trying to improve in this metric. I introduce a program. How did I do? And be willing to revise or adjust as needed. So it is this principle of continuous improvement. But one of the challenges we often see with recognition is firms stop short at identifying what is it they want to see increased because of the recognition, what is a measure that we might use to operationalize that, and then let's evaluate how did we do against some benchmark or what are we trying to accomplish. So these are sort of 6 higher level best practices. But again, I can't offer a one size fits all solution because there's great nuance, which makes a lot of sense because our employees differ considerably. And so a recognition program needs to be well tailored to the employees that we want to recognize that they have. So that's what we have for part 1, Una.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first one is just to touch on this evaluate and improve. You said people sometimes don't know what metrics they're trying to affect with recognition. What are some example metrics people could want to affect with a recognition program, just as kind of a menu of options that it could?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most common and underutilized metrics is employee engagement. There's several very simple metrics of employee engagement, and some are 3 to 9 questions that you can ask quarterly. And we can think about recognition in terms of how's it doing on the on average employee engagement or satisfaction. Other metrics to consider is, let's say it's a peer recognition program, the frequency with which recognition is being given. There was this well-established belief that more frequent recognition means good outcomes, but we haven't really seen a ton of evidence of that until more recently, just because it's hard to measure. But recent science is showing, yeah, the more we see recognition, especially peer recognition, it is a good proxy for an increase in good outcomes such as employee engagement, and in some more recent research that we've done in helping behavior. So those are sort of some of the metrics, but we can also extend it beyond that. Maybe it is a culture that you're trying to build. So let's measure culture. We have lots of ways to measure the quality of a firm's culture. You can maybe even extend it to things that are on the performance dimension. Happier employees tend to be, or more satisfied employees tend to be more productive. Let's look at the recognition usage, the performance of our recognition program relative to some performance outcomes. So several opportunities, and it really depends on what are we trying to do with this recognition program.
Adam, you mentioned helping behaviors and you mentioned this study. This is an audience question, but what does helping behaviors mean?
Yeah. Helping in its purest sense can be anything from a coworker is late to work, so I fill in for them. A coworker has to stay late for work because their work isn't done, so I do it for them. But it can extend even beyond that to, I know something that Una doesn't know, and I share this information willingly to her so she can improve her performance. So helping behavior is this gambit of efforts to share and share your time, effort, information with another employee so that they then can benefit. And we can think of helping in more of a proactive way. Someone didn't ask me for my help. I'm going to go out there and help without that. That is when you really got that culture of helping, when employees are proactively helping and seeing opportunity to help others. But we can also think of helping in terms of a reactive approach. I'm ready to help. I just need Alex or Una to ask me for help. So there's variations in the types of help. But yeah, it's largely just citizenship behavior.
Thank you. That's it for now. So we can keep going. There's a few more questions, but they're going to dive beautifully into the next section.
All right. We'll move on to section 2, and I'll turn the floor over, Ewelina, to you.
All right. Perfect. Okay, so thank you so much, Adam and Una, for those that great discussion and that overview that really tees up this next section. So hopefully I'll be able to build on the insights of why and how recognition can really boost employee engagement by asking a related question, right? So what happens when we add financial rewards to the mix? And there is this very common kind of stream of thought that says giving employees rewards can really undermine their intrinsic motivation. This is a phenomenon often labeled crowding out. And so on this slide, we're going to examine kind of this phenomenon. So what do I mean by crowding out? So essentially, the crowding out effect is this idea that providing extrinsic rewards like money can diminish people's natural or innate desire to do the work for its own sake. And there's some well-known studies that you may be familiar with, like the Israeli daycare fine study, the Swiss nuclear waste compensation study, and these famous kind of laboratory experiments with the Soma puzzles. And the takeaways from these well-known studies suggest that when you add a monetary element, it can shift perceptions of doing the right thing into this more kind of commercial exchange. And so, for instance, in that daycare study, the daycare was trying to reduce parent lateness, right? They wanted to get the caregivers to be able to go home to their families. And so they instituted a fine. And what they found is that when the daycares fined parents for picking up their children late, lateness actually increased, because the fine was seen as a fee rather than this intrinsic kind of moral obligation to be on time and let the caregivers go home. So these studies are very, very powerful in kind of making us question whether we should even attach rewards to recognition. But some of you on the webinar today might be asking yourself, and I know I've asked myself this, is, well, how well do these examples really map onto our workplaces? right? A daycare fee or decisions about nuclear waste, they don't necessarily reflect the everyday team dynamics that we're dealing with, right? And that's true, right? In workplaces, both rewards and recognition are deeply embedded in these kind of rich social connections we have with one another, reputational concerns, and then as Adam mentioned earlier, there's career incentives tied between recognition and rewards. And all of those factors are going to affect how we respond to rewards and recognition. So in addition, workplace rewards, especially those that are commonly linked to recognition programs, are often really modest, they're discretionary, and they're certainly not punitive in most cases. And so the takeaway is that the context matters. And so on the next slide, we ask, does crowding out actually happen when we reward employees for good performance and good kind of desirable behaviors in a professional setting? And when we look at the meta-analyses, which are going to pull and triangulate findings across multiple studies, the answer is not really, right? In fact, there's more evidence that shows that well-designed rewards don't erode that intrinsic motivation and can even amplify its link to performance. And that's why this recent article by Shaw and colleagues concluded that this crowding out effect in the workplace is probably more myth than reality. And so properly designed rewards paired with that kind of genuine, sincere recognition can really support employees' kind of internal motivation to contribute to their teams, right? And when people already kind of take pride in their work, right, this added acknowledgement of their contribution through these rewards can reinforce that sense of meaningfulness and value. So on this last slide here, we're going to talk about, well, how exactly do you combine rewards with recognition effectively? And here we're actually going to be drawing extensively on insights from Adam's work, where the guiding principle is that with rewards and recognition, the reward really needs to be distinct. What do I mean by that? Rewards should feel separate from base salary or any kind of normal compensation, because we want the rewards to signal that this is a genuine extra. This is a special acknowledgement of great work by the employee on some sort of important value for the organization. And so to help kind of drive home this distinction, I've got 4 best practices here that we've got kind of research evidence on to show that they can drive this distinctness and really amplify the benefits of recognition. So first, we've got here, we want less fungible rewards. Okay, so what does fungible mean? Fungible means that something is very easily exchanged or substituted, like cash. Okay, so $1 is the same as any other dollar. But when a reward is less fungible, so think like a really thoughtful gift card or some sort of unique piece of merchandise, it is by nature then more restricted on how the employee can use it, but it stands out as a special token rather than feeling like just another addition to someone's paycheck. And so having less fungible rewards is important. Second, you want to keep the rewards hedonic, right? So rewards with a really fun or even kind of an indulgent aspect, right? So some sort of luxury item that the employee would never buy for themselves, or some sort of experiential gift, or like a memorable event, right? These create more excitement than purely utilitarian ones. And kind of along that vein, then too, novelty really matters too. And so the best practice would be to think about kind of rotating these unique reward options or introducing kind of surprise elements to help maintain that employee interest. And then finally, you want to be able to pay attention to how you frame the rewards and recognition program. And some guidance here, I'm going to steal it from something that Adam said earlier. You want to frame it as early, often, and dynamic. Okay, so you definitely want to recognize the accomplishments soon after they happen, whether that's with recognition or the rewards for that recognition. And you want to do so often across a broad range of employees. But you also want to frame the program as something that's evolving rather than fixed. So if you're, constantly kind of updating the rewards program, even if you're just mixing up the offerings, you're avoiding kind of this permanent static program so that employees don't see the reward as this regular pay. And so if you put these elements together, less fungible rewards that have hedonic and value and novelty, and you pair that with this flexible framing, it'll help create this kind of reinforcing cycle of motivation where employees can then truly feel recognized for their contributions to the team and to the organizational culture, and they're not just handed another piece of their paycheck. So that's what I've got for now, and I'll turn it over to Una for your thoughts.
I have a few audience questions, and one before that is there a right time to introduce rewards into your recognition program? Should someone start with both at the same time, spares it out? How does that work?
Yeah. So we don't necessarily have empirical evidence on the exact timing that works. Do you introduce the recognition first and then layer in the rewards later? But what we do know is that you want, again, we don't know for sure that timing piece, but if you are going to do it, you want to do it in smaller amounts very frequently. So not huge, giant rewards, but just this nice hit all the time so that employees are constantly feeling that recognition whenever they're doing those positive behaviors. And so we would definitely be interested in partnering with people who are interested in that question to be able to empirically study that specific timing. And we do actually have data that shows that the rewards definitely amplify the use of recognition. We just don't know if those particular organizations started with the rewards right away or waited later to be able to do those.
This is a popular topic, so there's a few more questions I have for you. The first one is there evidence or concerns with rewards increasing competitiveness amongst colleagues and maybe leading to demotivation?
Oh, yeah, this is actually a great segue into Alex's topic next. So yeah, I love that folks are already thinking ahead to all of these potential issues. They can be, if the program is framed in a competitive way, where it's whoever gives the most recognition only gets this amount and nobody else gets any rewards, then that can create this kind of competitive mindset. And that would be problematic. I think that would probably go against the reason why you're trying to implement a recognition program in the workplace. So you want, just as the recognition to be broadly across the diverse set of groups, you want the reward to be available also to a broad set of groups to try to minimize those competitive aspects. Now, maybe there are cases, organizations where people can kind of work individually and they don't have to collaborate with one another, then you can get away with some of those more competitive type reward situations. But in most environments where people are working with one another and rely on each other's inputs and outputs to be able to get their job done, you want to try to avoid any rewards that are going to be only given to the top performer on this particular dimension.
Another question was, in a companies where budgets are concerns and the rewards, it's expensive to have gift cards and things that cost a lot of money. The question is, do recognition rewards have to cost money to be meaningful?
They can be. The research is pretty clear that you don't want to have big value rewards, because then the intensity of the reward can actually lead to some kind of undesirable behaviors. It really just has to be a small symbolic token of this appreciation. Does it have to cost money? I think to make it distinct from the recognition itself, there has to be something. But we can think of other kind of non-monetary things, like maybe I'm trying to think on the fly here of maybe good examples that I've seen in practice of having like a field trip for lunch for the group, right? So we all get to go to the park because the team did really well on this particular aspect, right? So everybody still brings their own lunch, but you get to go and have this kind of memorable event. Those are ways to be able to save on the money aspect and still be able to create that special kind of feeling.
Another related question. By the way, there are some comments in the chat which are really fun on the non-monetary stuff, like leaving work early or coming in late, getting to wear jeans for places that usually have a dress
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, awesome. Yep.
Another question is, how much mixing of the reward type is recommended? Like, at what point does a reward become regular and kind of falls into the background of obviousness and we don't appreciate it anymore?
You know, that kind of sliding scale, that would also be a great empirical question. So we don't have a lot of evidence on that, unless Adam or Alex can think of anything that comes to mind. When we go back to what Adam said about evaluating and improving your program, you know, you got to get a sense of what employees are thinking, right? You can get feedback from them. If they're saying, why aren't we getting this anymore? There's some expectation that was formed around there, and you probably waited too long to be able to mix it up, right? So this is part of that dynamic program, is this, you got to kind of do some trial and error and get some feedback from employees to see when that expectation starts forming. But if you set it from the beginning as an expectation, or at least the program is going to be constantly evolving, that sets employees on the right, at least starting point, to make sure that they're not doing that expectation formation, which is a really common issue with rewards in general.
I feel like it's a common issue with everything, right? As soon as we come to expect something in a restaurant or in a service or whatever, when people take it away, we're all up in arms about it. So it seems like human nature.
Yes, for sure.
Last question on this topic, so we can move towards the leaderboard. But this is more of a general question. So I'm curious what people who are using HeyTaco on the call, if they can just type in their answers, but also a question for you, which is, for example, one person has said, we've been using HeyTaco for a while and had the carrot in form of the reward store, right, within HeyTaco. Have there been any instances where there's no physical rewards for giving tacos? So I'm curious what people on the call think, and I'm curious what the three of you have partnered on a research project where you looked at the anonymized data about how are people using HeyTaco. I'm curious kind of what you learned through that, about can people use it successfully without the carrot of a reward?
So they can. I mean, we definitely, and Alex will talk about the leaderboards. Those also have an effect on how people use tacos and give out recognition. But the evidence was pretty clear that the organizations that use the rewards on the most conservative basis, it was like 80% higher in terms of how much recognition they were giving one another. And that was on the conservative side. In some instances, it was 2 or 3 times higher. And so again, it's that reinforcing mechanism that says, we want to be able to recognize our employees and we want to set up that culture, and we have this kind of symbolic token. We don't know exactly what types of incentives specifically and rewards the organizations were doing, but just having that reward link was a very powerful predictor of the engagement with the recognition.
Awesome, thank you. All right, let's go into the leaderboards, because it seems like that's going to answer a lot of our questions about competitiveness in the workplace.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I would just like to talk about leaderboards in the workplace, kind of try to understand like how they work, and then what you might do in the workplace and concerning, whether you should implement a leaderboard, and if so, like what type. Okay, so just stepping back a little bit, how do leaderboards actually work? How do they influence employees' behavior? We think that the research suggests that there's really 3 mechanisms by which leaderboards can affect employee behavior, just behavior in general. The first is that leaderboards can inform social norms, and then doing so, direct behavior. And when I think about this, I often go back to high school, where we were ranked for some club based on how many volunteer hours we had. And so in doing so, it told me as a student that, okay, hey, this organization values volunteership. And it tells me that volunteering is something that's kind of common among my peers. And so in doing so, it tells me, okay, Alex, you should probably volunteer more. So that's one way in which leaderboards can inform and direct behavior. Another mechanism by which leaderboards can direct behavior is that it can elicit these self-image concerns. And when I think about these self-image concerns and social image concerns, I often go back to this example of, sales leaderboards, which are quite common in practice. In terms of self-image concerns, I think as a salesperson, I would want to view myself as a competent salesperson. And so when I'm ranked against my peers in terms of how many sales I have in a given month, I want to see myself high because I want to see myself as a competent salesperson. So that's going to make me try a little bit harder. And then on a similar token, I want my peers to see me as a good salesperson. And so if I know that my peers are going to see my sales performance on the leaderboard each month, that's going to make me try a little bit harder. And maybe that's going to increase my performance a little bit. So those are really the three mechanisms by which leaderboards can direct and inform behavior. So some positives, as I mentioned on the previous slides, it can increase employees' effort and often lead to better performance. So we have this really nice study in 2013 by Abel Tofkoff in accounting. And what he does is he compares employees' performance when there's no leaderboard present versus when there is a leaderboard present. And then he also compares how the effect of leaderboards, well, it depends on how employees are paid. And so he finds that leaderboards just in general increase employees' performance, and particularly when they're paid based on their performance and not just a flat rate regardless of how they perform. And the theory here is that the performance-based pay increases self-image concerns, and that's why the leaderboards are even more effective in that setting. And so this is just one example of a study, but it's very common. This is widely found finding. Leaderboards tend to make people try harder, and they can have a lot of positive outcomes. On the flip side, though, I think someone mentioned in this chat, which is great that you're thinking about this, and something that we've thought about too, is that leaderboards can, in encouraging competition, that can have some downsides. Particularly, it can lead to things like sabotage. And so, yes, on one hand, it can increase employees' effort, but it can also come with these, negative downsides such as sabotage. And so that's why I really think it's careful for employers to think about both the pros and cons to having leaderboards. And so that leads us to a question that we had, as we noticed that what got me interested in this particularly was that I noticed that there's a lot of peer-to-peer recognition programs that have leaderboards in them. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. You have a leaderboard which is designed to spur competition, but you have it in a setting where, we're trying to get employees to work together, to recognize one another, very like cooperative aspects. So how does that cooperation mix with this elements of competition? And so if you want to use a leaderboard, the question is, okay, what kind? And we see in practice that there's really two major kinds that employees use. The first is a leaderboard that's based on the number of times recognition is given. And so as an employee gives more recognition, they get a higher rank on the leaderboard. The alternative to that is you can rank employees based on the number of times they receive recognition themselves. Now, just anecdotally, we think that this is probably the most common one. But interestingly, we find that, the takeaway of this is that ranking basis really matters. And in fact, the given leaderboard is the one that leads to the most helping behavior. And we find that ranking employees based on the number of times that they receive recognition actually leads employees to help each other less. So we think that competitive spirit actually harms the overall spirit of cooperation that peer-to-peer recognition programs are supposed to foster. And so now, why does it do that? Well, our research shows that a given leaderboard does a really nice job in maintaining the perceived sincerity of help, but the received leaderboard diminishes it greatly. And we think this is because when you rank employees based on the number of times they receive recognition, it kind of turns helping and these cooperative behaviors into more of like an exchange format where I help you with the expectation that I'm going to get recognition in return. And that just makes my helping behavior seem a lot less sincere to the person that I'm helping. And that actually leads to less helping behavior overall. Likewise, this received leaderboard diminishes the sincerity of the recognition itself. So the given leaderboard does a great job. It maintains the sincerity of recognition, but the received leaderboard, by making us an expectation that employees are going to receive recognition in exchange for doing something, it makes the entire thing feel less sincere. The help feels less sincere, and the recognition you receive in return feels less sincere. And I don't show this here, but we actually show that in our experiment, the received leaderboard, not only does it diminish the perceived sincerity of recognition, it makes people recognize each other less. So it has the exact opposite effect in terms of both helping and recognition that we're trying to aim for with these peer-to-peer recognition programs. And so you might be asking, okay, we did that in a nice experiment. Well, how does it actually translate to a real workplace? And so Ewelina was very kind enough to let us analyze some anonymized data from her customers. And we find that a giving leaderboard is associated with more tacos given, meaning that employees are recognizing each other a little bit more when there's that giving leaderboard present. And in doing so, that more frequent recognition is leading to greater customer satisfaction. And so we have both really nice experimental evidence and then real world evidence from hundreds of different customers that suggest that the giving leaderboard is really a nice addition to a peer-to-peer recognition program.
Alex, we always had a thought that the given leaderboards were important, but you kind of help put science behind a gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, why do we think that received leaderboards are kind of end all be all? Because that seems to be the most, I mean, we all think that, right? It's kind of the common assumption that that's how we should rank people. Why is that?
I think it's because it's very, it just comes across as, I think, more as a reward in terms of if you want people to help, you want those people deserve to be recognized, and show maybe you should present the people who are getting recognized most, and that will spur more helping. Because if you're highest on the received leaderboard, presumably you're doing more of the behavior that we like. And we think that it really creates this perception that my otherwise sincere behavior is being motivated by this desire for recognition, and that just ruins the kind of the spirit of helping, and it just turns it into a very transactional kind of icky exchange, and it just brings down helping, it brings down recognition, it has really detrimental effects. And so we think that it's very intuitive as to why many companies do that. But our evidence suggests at least that it's probably not the best idea, and that, ranking people on the number of times they give recognition, that's probably the better solution.
A few questions on this topic from the audience. One is, doesn't giving make people feel better rather than getting something?
The question is, does giving, I think so. And I think one reason why we think the giving leaderboard works well is that it focuses people's attention, as you just mentioned, on, doing something nice for others. And that just creates this snowball effect. It feels good to do something nice for others. But then once people see that recognition is common, that's kind of the social norm aspect that I talk about. The leaderboard suggests, the giving leaderboard suggests that recognition is something that we do, and it happens a lot. And then employees just feed on that, and it just creates a nice snowball effect where it just keeps happening. So there's research that suggests that giving is better than receiving. And I think this might be one example to support that.
A connected question to that, kind of like, if you just focus on the giving, can it also reduce the quality of recognition given? Like, if people know that they get higher on the leaderboard by simply giving recognition, they just give it to get higher. In HeyTaco, they just give tacos without saying what the taco is for, and then also becomes not genuine. Like, can it go into that extreme?
So it's an interesting thing, and we actually thought about this. In our experiment, we allowed for people to give recognition even when it wasn't warranted. And we found that our participants did a really, to their credit, a really nice job of maintaining a strong norm of when recognition should or should not be given. And so even though we allowed people in our study to give recognition when it wasn't warranted, we found that people did, they maintained some criteria. And so it didn't diminish the motivation behind it, or the justification behind it at all. And because people were giving it when it was warranted, the people who were receiving recognition didn't view it as any less sincere when there was no leaderboard there.
I feel like my personal opinion, not grounded in any data, but kind of like with rewards, you recommend switching it up. What do you think about switching up what you celebrate on the leaderboard? Maybe 1 quarter, 1 month, it's focusing on the givers, and 1 quarter, it's on the receivers. And maybe 1 quarter, we don't even focus on the quantity and we just focus on the quality. Any thoughts on how that could affect people's engagement and the sincerity of recognition?
Well, we don't have any evidence on that point in particular. Just on the top of my head, though, I would think that as long as you communicate it ahead of time, whereas the giving leaderboard is not always going to be there, and we're just kind of experimenting, and we're going to try something new every quarter. I think as long as you set that expectation, the expectation of change early, then you could very well see a positive effect of that. And people like to see things change. It just keeps the program interesting. So I could imagine that has some positive effects. I wish I could give you firm evidence to support that, but we just don't have that this time.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to keep asking questions since we're at the end of our kind of presentation. So feel free to jump in, whoever, because they're kind of a little bit leaderboards, a little bit rewards, a little bit in general. This is connected to the leaderboard, but is there any benefit to seeing results in real time on the leaderboard versus delayed reveal of results? At the end of the quarter, we're going to share the winners. At the end of the week, you get a screenshot of the leaderboard in your collaboration channels. Any thoughts from anyone on that?
Yeah, I can jump in. One thing that we want to be too careful of is what in experiment speak we call end games, where it adds a little bit of strategy right near the last little tail. This thing's closing here. And so you get some really unusual behaviors. We want to try not to create systems of recognition that are merely a game, where we want to necessarily win this game with strategy that isn't what the firm wants. Going back to that first principle of recognition being, it needs to be congruent with what we're trying to do with this program. So being mindful of that when designing your programs is quite important. The one thing, though, that I'd add to something Alex was saying is by giving a lot, you sort of reframe the exchange as, if I'm not getting tacos, then I'm not doing something. And so it almost reframes the conversation around you don't need the recognition to be necessarily exclusive for it to be effective. In fact, really well-run recognition programs are ones in which recognition is quite common, quite frequent, and it's when there isn't recognition, we have some questions about, are we doing what the firm wants? So, and the other thing, sorry, jumping to something I said earlier, just returning to this idea of the cost of a recognition program. We often talk about recognition programs as being costless. Unless we introduce rewards, this is a costless program. Well, that's not quite true, right? Good recognition, sincere recognition does cost you time. It costs you effort. It costs you energy. It may not cost you in terms of financial outlay for these micro rewards, these gift cards, or whatever you tie to recognition, but truly sincere recognition is time consuming, and time is money. And so continuing to think of your recognition programs, well-run recognition programs, as needing a budget behind it. And I know sometimes the appeal of recognition is, well, it's cheap. Yeah, bad recognition is super cheap. But to do recognition well, for it to be sincere, for it to be well run, well designed, it takes time, and time, as everybody on this call knows, is costly. Sorry, that was a lot of thoughts I was thinking about there.
Thank you, Adam. One question that we get often, or people often ask, seems to be common across just how we work in companies, which is, what are some things that can be done to get the C-suite to engage in the program? It's a very popular question amongst people who are wanting to put time and energy and resources towards developing recognition programs. Any thoughts?
One thought that I would have is I think it's helpful to make a nice business case as to why recognition is actually important, and that it's linked to all these more behaviors that they might view as important, such as not just straight up employee performance, but things like retention as well. And we all know that it costs a ton more money to have to, let someone go or have someone leave the firm and then have to retrain someone and replace them. Like, there's so many costs in terms of just time and actual money involved in that. And so anything you can do to retain your really good talent. And I think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that recognition is one such tool to help do that. And so I think if you can just stress the business case for it, and it's not just a warm fuzzy thing. Yes, it is a little bit warm fuzzy, but those warm fuzzies have a lot of real consequences in terms of just financial dollars and actual like hard firm outcomes. That would just be one suggestion that I would have.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, Una, if I could just quickly add to that,
Sure.
and the return on investment, and the accountant and the three of us would always return to this, that I really love how Alex put the business case needs to be there, particularly for the C-suite. And the beauty is the science shows there is a business case for it, that good recognition does offer high returns on investments. And so I would encourage folks to consider pitching it in that manner.
One more question about just driving engagement with recognition. What advice would you have for some teams in a company that are leaning into recognition more than others? Right? Maybe your marketing team is really into it, but the dev team is not. What do you think about some advice for driving adoption across teams?
One thought that I would have is just to try to understand at first, like, what is the reluctance, or what is stopping them from engaging with the program? Is it a lack of training? Is it they're just too busy? And then so like once you find out like what the actual issue is, you might have a better idea of how to address it. But I also, one tip that I would have would be, if you can just get one or two employees on that team to start using it more, I think that there's a high chance that you'll get the snowball effect where, if one employee starts recognizing other people on the team, that just kind of is the social norm establishing it, and then other people start to follow on, and you get the really nice snowball effect. Those are just two thoughts that I would have on that.
Yep, I would definitely second those suggestions. And then add on top of that is just take a look at what the rewards are. If you have rewards linked, maybe there's some more distinct or special rewards for that particular team that may be more meaningful than what you're offering now, right? So there's definitely different, even kind of subcultures within teams. And so getting a good feel for that might kind of get you to boost the recognition giving.
Yeah, if I can just add one more thing too, is going back to that idea, there's different features of a recognition program, and that we don't have a one size fits all. Well, that's true within the firm. And so different teams desire different forms of recognition. It's often thought of as not a good idea to think of your employees in types, but in actual fact, there are great types that we need to consider when we're designing these programs. And so having a program that's somewhat flexible is important. A good example is forward-facing employees tend to value public recognition to a greater degree than those in the back end. It's more of a types of an individual. And so this might be where you use a recognition program, but some of the features differ slightly depending on the types of employees that are in those positions.
We're almost at time. So there's a few questions that have been unanswered, but I will jot them down and answer them in an email that will be going out to everyone shortly afterwards. One kind of call to action to everyone on the call is, Ewelina, Alex, and Adam obviously do a lot of research in the lab regarding performance management recognition, and they're always willing to partner with industry and would love to partner with industry in figuring out how do those things actually work in practice. So if you ever want to partner with three smart people on figuring out how to make your workplace better, I will share their contact information so you can just reach out to them directly and see if there's an opportunity to work together. And as a parting question, I would love to know what the three of you are working on in terms of research next. What's kind of getting you up out of bed these days? Ewelina, can we start with you again?
So I think I mentioned that I do a lot of technology-based research. So working with a company right now to see how they're using AI to do performance evaluation. So this is a little bit of a sticky kind of topic. And so I think it's important for companies to be able to get it right. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Awesome. How about you, Alex?
As you know, we're working on a field study with a company that has hundreds of employees, and so we're testing how the introduction of a peer-to-peer recognition program affects employee engagement and performance. And then also we're going to later on tack on a given leaderboard to see how the addition of that might incrementally affect employee performance and engagement. And so that having a nice partner in the field that's willing to work with us on that, and then to be able to provide them insights and then share those insights with our field. Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Nice. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, and continue on the theme of AI and advanced technology in the spirit of performance management. How can we use these tools, but use them in a proper, conscientious way, and in a way that maintains the sincerity that's needed for recognition and reward programs to work and work well. So that continues to sort of be a theme for my research, and I know Ewelina and Alex as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us and sharing your thoughts. I definitely, every time we talk, I learn something new. So I appreciate every hour I get to spend with you. Everyone else, thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any questions, please respond to the follow-up email that's coming. And again, if you want to connect with Ewelina, Adam, and Alex, their contact information will be there as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.